What's up, guys? I'm nobody special, and I am delighted. I've got my buddy Travis from Real Estate Mindset is back with us today, and he's got an update for us about the housing market, the economy as a whole. And if you're not familiar with Travis's channel, Real Estate Mindset is a fantastic real estate channel. I highly recommend you guys follow that. I'm going to put a link in the description down below, so you definitely check that out. And of course, tell him that nobody sent you. Travis, how we doing today, buddy?
Doing fantastic, man. I was also playing mother. I was watching my kids for the last 3 days. I almost said babysitting, but I don't want to get hit. I've already been hit by my wife. So I'm a little tired, man. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Love being here. Looking forward to covering all kinds of bases today.
You know, and while we're on this subject, a little hint into my life right now. I too am Mr. Mom today because my kids are home from school because there's an escaped convict on the loose in my neighborhood.
Oh, man.
So that's fun. I'm doubling as a YouTuber slash babysitter slash perimeter walker for this week. So never a dull moment in this line of work, brother. So what do you got for us today?
All right, man. Well, I'm going to start by basically going over a couple of things that the Federal Reserve is doing right now. Obviously, we're doing quantitative tightening. And basically, whether you're a bull or a bear, you believe we're either going to enter a soft landing, right? Or we're going to have a soft landing, or we're going to have a hard landing. So I thought it would be appropriate if we started with the definition of soft landing. What is a soft landing? So that's where I'll start, Jack. Okay, so a hard landing, a series of interest rate reductions most often do not begin until a recession has already begun or too shortly before the recession has begun. Now, a soft landing is basically whenever the rate increases stop in time to avoid recession. They call that obviously the soft landing. Now, digging into this a little bit deeper, we see basically, in contrast, we've never been able to avoid recession when inflation has peaked above 5%. And you guys can see basically 1970, 1974, 1980, 1990, and 2008. Now, obviously, Jack, your viewers probably know we have been in 2022 well above 5% inflation.
So every single time, going all the way back to 1970, whenever we've had inflation go above 5%, I'm guessing the Fed's efforts to fight that inflation has resulted in a recession. They overcorrect every time.
Every time. And really that amounts to, what's important to us as consumers is unemployment. So basically that's a brief breakdown on soft landing versus hard landing. So now what I want to do, Jack, is go over the fundamentals of the housing market right now, starting with PE ratio, which is basically the price to earning ratio. Now, I'm not sure how well you guys can see this, but this graph down here, or this chart down here, shows us the various PE ratios going back to the 1980s. You guys can see the PE ratio for the 1980s was actually under 5%, and it stayed that way up until about the year of 2000. We entered a housing market bubble. The PE ratio got slightly over 7% and then obviously went down. Now, as of middle of 2022, we actually hit a PE ratio of 7.6%. You guys can see that right here. As of June 2022, the ratio stands at 7.76, a marginal slip from the highest ratio on record, which occurred May of the same year. So the PE ratio right now, Jack, is absolutely out of control alone. So that's one huge fundamental that we don't even have in place. And what I'm saying is, because of the lack of fundamentals, we can't sustain the prices based on PE ratio alone. But I'm going to do one step further.
Now, Travis, before you switch off from that chart, could you elaborate a little bit? Typically, when we hear PE ratio on this channel, we're talking about the price to earnings multiple of a stock. Could you elaborate a little bit on what PE ratio means in terms of the housing market?
So basically, it's the home price and how many years it would take for the average median income, the median household income to pay off the house. So back in the 1980s, it took a little less than 5 years for 5 years of median household income to equate the price of a home. So right now, again, man, that went up to almost eight times in the middle of last year.
Okay, so that's pretty profound data point right there, right? Homes have never been more expensive relative to what we earn, is what you're saying. So that's bubble territory right there, isn't higher than the last bubble.
Well, it is bubble territory, and the trajectory, if you compare the trajectory from 2000 to 2006, the trajectory of the skyrocketing PE ratio exceeds it. So again, man, the lack of fundamentals equals, unsustainability. And this is just one thing I want to point out. Now let's look at the payment to price ratio. Now, basically, what I want to point out, Jax, is normally you want about 28% of your income as a consumer going towards paying off your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And again, this measures affordability. This is how much consumers are paying towards their mortgage. Again, remember, 28% is what's healthy, as you can see here. But let's see what it is right now on average. So as you can see here from the national payment to income ratio, we are well over 28%. We're sitting at right now, Jack, 38.3% national payment to income ratio. And the crazy thing about that, Jack, is that's not even including insurance or taxes.
Wow. So just principal and interest, the average person right now is paying almost 40% of their income, just P&I. No,
That's correct.
no insurance, no association fees, no property taxes, just P&I. That's incredible.
It is. So when we add the taxes, when we add the insurance, or even the PMI for mortgage insurance, I mean, this is going to be in the 40%. It is so bad right now. There's such a lack of fundamentals. It's absolutely shocking. And that's not all. When we go to Case-Shiller, and I showed your viewers this last time, we can see the massive bubble that we're in. So not only do we have an unaffordability crisis, we also have a run-up or asset bubble similar, if not worse, than 2008. And you guys can see that when we look around 2001 to the peak in about 2006. This run-up in equity is not as bad as the run-up in equity that we experienced after lockdowns around April of 2020. The equity or value of homes shot up so high, so quickly, it put us in a situation to where as a nation, regardless of what happens next, it is a fact. We are in a massive asset bubble in the housing market. So that is another thing that I want to point out, Jack, where it's something else in the housing market that's not built on fundamentals. I don't believe that type of value, that type of price run up is sustainable.
Yeah, the shape of that chart is pretty interesting too. That we had that little dip in 2000. Was that 22? We had that dip, but now it's rising again.
Yeah. So the very interesting thing here is we started out around May of 2022 with price decline. The price decline towards the middle of 2022 exceeded any start of price decline in history. However, the interesting thing is, and what we're saying now is the rebound. The rebound has been substantial. Now, I believe the rebound, Jack, is more of a dead cat bounce or the last of the money. It could be excess savings. But I believe the biggest reason for this rebound is the bank bailout in March. I mean, when you inject $400 billion into the economy and you avoid mass pandemonium with the bank runs, which would have been natural in my opinion, you're basically kicking the can down the road. And I believe this run up, and it is a historical rebound. That's a historical rebound that we see right there. I think it's medicated, to be quite honest with you. I think that's a propped up rebound. I don't think it's sustainable. What do you think?
I'm right there with you. I say what changed in the first quarter of this year, and it was the
Yeah.
bank crisis and the Fed's liquidity injection. And we did see interest rates came down. Now, if that was the case, interest rates now are right back where they were in March. So if that's the case, then we should see this chart in pretty short order here resume its southerly movement, and the decline should pick right back up.
The
Interesting.
interesting thing is the interest rates are now higher than, this time last year, and demand is actually lower. So we have worse unaffordability. We have lower demand. So, again, it's only a matter of time that, I believe that the values of houses are going to fall apart. The interesting thing, though, is, Jack, it does depend on the metro area. Some metro areas have been incredibly, resilient. Now, when it comes to new construction, we haven't even seen a rebound in prices with new construction. We're specifically talking about existing homes, right? New inventory is its own thing. But existing homes, on average, right now, we're past the peak. The problem, though, is on average, the being past from peak is only it's only moderately past peak. We wanted to see sharp declines like we have last year, and what I'm saying is it hasn't started that way yet. So talking about the health of the consumer, let's start with excess savings. Obviously, we know that through COVID, the government printed a ridiculous amount of money and put that in the hands of the consumer, going around the traditional method of quantitative easing, which would be through the financing institutions. Now, as of March of 2023, there is a roughly $500 billion left of excess savings. The excess savings started at 2.1 trillion. So people have been spending money like crazy. So from March until June, it's gone from 500 billion all the way down to $190 billion in excess savings. Now, the crazy thing about all this is, Jack, that the economists estimate that excess savings will be completely depleted by the third quarter of 2023, or rather October of this year. People are done with all of that money.
Wow. So we burned down almost 300 billion in savings in what, 5 months. We're down to almost nothing. We're at 190, 180 billion, I think you said. They're saying that's going to hit zero right around October, coincidentally, right as student loan payments come back. Well, that ought to speed us on our way to financial excellence. So the cost of living, the inflation story, while this is going on, while we've been burning down our excess savings, we've also been running up debt. We've also been cutting back on our spending. So the American consumer is not in nearly as good a shape as some of the mainstream press has been telling us lately, is what this tells me.
That's 100% correct. And that brings me to the next segment, which is exactly what you mentioned. In October, school loans start. And when we look at the sheer volume of school loans, it's shocking, Jack. It's absolutely shocking. We have $1.6 trillion worth of debt about to start payments in October. The interest has already started accumulating September 1st, but that affects 43 million borrowers. Once those payments start, that's going to put additional drainage on purchasing power for consumers. Now, the average person has about $37,000 worth of school loans. The average payment, depending on the estimates that you review, is anywhere from $350 to $400 a month. But not only are the school loans out of control, or about to get out of control, rather, when we look here, credit card debt, like you just mentioned, is absolutely skyrocketing. Never has credit card debt gone up this quickly. It is absolutely shocking. We're sitting at over now $1 trillion in consumer credit card debt. So they're spending into oblivion, Jack. They're spending into oblivion and cannot control themselves. Or there's a portion of people like that, or some people, specifically at the bottom, and it's very sad, have to use their credit cards just to afford groceries.
I've been seeing a lot of stories recently too, in the last couple of days, even rejections for limit extensions are going up. Rejections for new cards are going up. So the banks are getting weary of these rising credit card balances. And people, if you think you're just going to go to your bank and they're going to raise your limit because you've hit it, that's not a safe assumption. So be careful with those credit card balances, guys. And the interest on this debt is going up at the same time. So you got to get out of that credit card debt any way you can, folks.
And it's not just credit card debt. Take a look at the auto loans. Auto loans are sitting at 1.5 trillion, Jack. There are some people purchasing new vehicles right now that are $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 with $1,000 monthly payment. Auto loans right now are absolutely crazy. But the worst thing of all with the credit cards and the auto loans is the default rates are exceeding now pre-pandemic levels and basically are skyrocketing. The rate of new credit card delinquencies has surpassed its pre-COVID level, clocking in at 7.2% delinquency rate in the second quarter of this year. And honestly, that's the second quarter. It's probably way worse right now, but it is sitting at 7.2%. A little bit shocking. Now, auto loan delinquency is the same thing. It's higher than pre-pandemic levels, sitting at 7.3%. But again, the really, really crazy thing here is the mortgage delinquencies remain incredibly low, probably obviously as a result of the overwhelming amount of equity that homeowners still have as long as they purchased prior to 2022. The homeowners that purchased after 2022 aren't the same type of homeowner, not even close. So basically what we looked at is the Fed that we can't trust with bad history of quantitative tightening and quantitative easing. We've looked at certain fundamentals of the housing market, which are basically completely trash, not sustainable. We looked at the health of the consumer, which is completely horrible. Now let's look at another thing, which is recession indicators, because the thing is everything I've talked about so far, we haven't even started recession yet. So starting right now with the 10 and the 2-year inversion, you probably cover this a lot on your channel, but I just wanted to point out that we've been inverted now for over 14 months, essentially, meaning the 2 and the 10 are inverted. Now the average time of inversion is actually 15 months before we go into recession. Now the interesting thing here, Jack, is a lot of people assume incorrectly that this has to re-invert before we enter recession. But when we look back and we max this out, we can actually see we stayed inverted during the 70s and 80s inflationary crisis, and we entered recession while we were inverted. Nevertheless, what I'm saying is this is one huge economic indicator that is telling us beware, pain is to come. It's not even here yet. And then when we look at GDP plus, this is GDP plus going back to the 1960s. Whenever this goes negative, usually this is an indicator that we're already in recession. And right now, Jack, GDP plus shows as of the Q1 of 2023, negative. So it's quite possible we're already in recession. Nevertheless, all of this is spelling out something is very wrong right now. And not only that, I think we really need to look at the MT money supply, because this is really historical what's going on here. The last time M2 money supply went down, I believe, was 75 years ago. In fact, the last time that M2 went down at the same time as quantitative tightening was the Great Recession. We have so many things going on right now in our economy. It's absolutely shocking that there has been a rebound at all in home prices. But there's one thing that we still haven't had, which is unhinged. And this is a bad thing. This is not good. I'm not saying this is good at all, but we don't have unhinged unemployment. However, month over month, and I know you're going to break this down on my channel, we've had an increase of unemployment of 30 basis points. When we start to annualize that type of rate of unemployment, that could possibly mean we get to 5 to 6 unemployment, basically in the snap of a fingers. And honestly, when we go back to the 1969s around over here, basically before entering this recession, October 1969, we were at an unemployment rate of 3.7%. Unemployment was lower before we entered this recession. All right. And then when we go to 1973 over here, we can see unemployment was 4.8. And then boom, skyrocketed upward. So when we fast forward to the great financial collapse back in 2007, we see right here in September 2007, unemployment was 4.7, and then boom, skyrocketed. So what I'm really saying here is things can change on the drop of a hat. And pretty much every recession that we've had an unemployment rate of about 4%, which is not far off from where we're at right now. Now, here's the thing, Jack. Last time I was on your channel, I ended with consumer regret. Okay, we ended with consumer regret, buyer's regret. A whopping 90% of homeowners in 2023 that were surveyed, based on the survey, had some type of regret. What I want to do now is I want to end on consumer empowerment. Now, obviously, we don't know what's going to happen for sure, but we know that things are incredibly choppy right now. So part of consumer empowerment is awareness. And what I want to do as far as awareness is I want to talk about what we should be doing, whether we've just purchased a house or whether we're on the sidelines. And if we're on the sidelines, one of the things that I'm doing personally and that I teach on my channel is purchasing power. One of the best ways to create purchasing power is obviously having no consumer debt, but obviously understanding how credit works. And one of the most important things when it comes to credit were 2 things. Number 1, you have to stop the bad from happening. A late payment can drop your credit score from 50 to 100 points. And the other thing I want to mention is one of the best ways to increase your credit score is understanding how credit cards work. Credit cards is the only type of debt that has something called utilization ratio. The lower the balance is on your credit card debt compared to the credit line, the more your credit score will go up. And I want to show you how that works now. Now, first of all, what we're looking at here, Jack, is a credit report. And don't worry, this is a fake credit report. I've had my credit report provider make this for me because I train on credit reports often. Now, when it comes to qualifying for a loan, the lender uses your middle credit score, basically whatever credit score is in the middle. So this person has a 670, 675, and 661. So their qualifying credit score would be a 670. That would be what would be used to qualify for a home loan. But what I want you guys to pay attention to is basically each of this debt is a trade line, and each trade line is calculated individually. And also remember what I said, the only thing that matters for the sake of argument, Jack, when it comes to increasing your credit score is revolving debt or utilization ratio. The first three debts here are mortgages, and therefore generally when you pay your whole mortgage off, no credit score increase. Shocking to me. Only your revolving debt. And you guys can see this first one right here. You guys can see that this is REV, that stands for revolving debt. You can see their credit line is $2,700, but look at, they've almost maxed this out. $2,600 in charges, credit line only $2,700. That means they're maxed out. And you guys can see when I go down this credit profile, each of these trade lines is, other than this one right here, is well over 30%. Now, let me show you what happens when you pay down credit cards that are overcharged. All right, so what we're looking at here is something called a what if scenario. Now, this is analyzing the wife's credit profile that we just reviewed. And I want to bring your attention to the utilization ratio column right here. And as you can see, only revolving debt, which is the same thing as credit card, has this utilization ratio. So I want you guys to watch what happens when you listen to what I'm saying and make sure that your balances are extremely low. So we have a borrower right here that starts with a credit score of 663. But watch what happens when I start paying all of this debt down, this credit card debt down. Credit score shoots up. You see that? Look at that.
Wow, that's dropped.
Okay.
I mean, that's going through the roof
Shocking.
right now. 663 to 742.
That's correct. Yes. And all they did was paid their credit cards the right way. Jack, that's roughly a 90 FICO. That's a 90-point credit score increase just because they were smart about their spending. But let me show you what happens if you're late on a credit card. So let me start this over. You can see we're back at 663. Let me show you what happens if I'm late on this little tiny baby $81 payment. It's only an $81 payment, but look at what happens, okay? I'll select 30 days late. We go from a 663 to a 577.
Wow.
Right.
You're not going to get approved for anything at that nowadays, not with the banks tightening their standards. And that was just one, what was that, 30 days late on an $80 payment for a credit card. Takes you down almost 100 points.
So credit is only one of the things that we need for purchasing power. Another thing that we need for purchasing power is money. In order to save money for obviously down payment, closing costs, and just basically being able to afford being a homeowner, we need to understand how we spend our money. And I just wanted to tell your viewers something that I use to monitor my subscriptions, because subscriptions, Jack, oh my gosh, man, my wife and I found, and this was like 2 weeks ago, shame on me, we had like 24 subscriptions. So we canceled a whole bunch and we saved another over $200 a month. I'm so ashamed, but here's what I'm using. I have absolutely no affiliation with any of these companies. I'm just simply telling you guys what I use as a consumer, because I do want to make you aware that there are things out there. I use Rocket Money. We used Rocket Money. When you sign up for this, it actually automatically somehow, I think it's tied to your email, tracks what you have subscriptions on. So again, when my wife went over it, there's no way I thought we had 24, Jack. So we did this thing, Rocket Money, found we had 24 subscriptions. I saved another $200. So if you guys want to find something like that, I use Rocket Money. But not only that, I also use this app. This is called Mint. Okay, so it's mint.com. I have it on my phone, and this shows me exactly what I'm spending my money on. I have every penny attached to this software. So if someone spends 10 cents or if someone spends $1,000, I can track it by using mint.com. And it's really cool also, Jack, because, you know, my wife and I, we have fun with it. It's a husband-wife thing. It's kind of exciting, but we have a budget made. So we know whether or not we go over budget with bills, utilities, childcare, and another big one, not only subscriptions, going out to eat. Shame on us. We're doing way better now.
No, one of the tricks I did, it was, years ago, I did the same thing. My subscriptions were out of control. We didn't have these apps back then, so I had to go through my own bills manually and do
Yeah.
this. I did this for myself and for my wife, and I'm not kidding. It was hundreds of dollars a month that was just leaks in the bucket, as
Yeah.
I refer to them,
Yeah.
right? You know, you're trying to build up a savings, you're putting water in the bucket, but the bucket is leaking. You got to plug
Yeah.
those holes. And what we did was, so we didn't notice the difference and get comfortable because our spending went down, is when I eliminated all of those unnecessary expenses, I set my checking account to make automatic deposits into a separate savings account. So I didn't notice any change in my monthly balances. But what did happen is after a year of that, all of a sudden I had enough cash accumulated that I was able to go start buying stocks. I was able to go start making investments because I saved all that money. I eliminated all those leaks in my bucket, but then I put a new leak in the bucket to my other bucket and I let the water accumulate there. And when it added up to a couple of grand, I went and I made a couple of investments that did very well. And it made a very big difference. So, you know, you may be one of those folks on the sidelines who says, I'll never be able to afford stocks. I can barely make my payment. Go do this. And instead of bleeding cash and paying all these apps whose very business model is built around you signing up and then forgetting to cancel, that's why they give you that free service at the beginning, the free 3 months, because they know you're going to forget. Don't fall for that sales pitch. Start paying yourself instead. And within a few months, you're actually going to be able to get ahead.
Amen, brother. And you know what? And the reason I'm even bringing this up is, most Americans have these leaky buckets. And, most Americans don't know that it's actually not a leak. It's pouring out water, and the water's not just water. It's their hard-earned money that they pay taxes on. They've had to go into work. Who knows how long they're working, 40 hours, 50 hours, whatever it is. But I mean, most consumers have this problem. It's like shocking to me. Now, the last thing I want to talk about as far as consumer awareness is I want to talk about an amortization schedule. An amortization schedule pertains to someone's mortgage. A lot of people don't understand that when you get a 30-year fixed rate, even if it's adjustable, a 30-year mortgage, it's front loaded with crazy, crazy amounts of interest. So let me show you what that looks like. So what we have here is an amortization schedule. I put the average loan amount, 30-year loans. I put today's interest rate of 7.3. That's as of today. Okay, now that we've calculated this, we see that the total interest someone would pay on a $368,000 loan amount, which is the average loan amount right now, would be $540,000. But that's not the worst part of this. If we go down here, look at the first 5 years, okay? Now, I've been trying to tell my viewers, Jack, about a strategy that I use, which is paying your principal down after you close. Okay, so it's not a down payment. I'm not talking about a down payment. I'm talking about someone closing the transaction and putting additional money towards the principal of their mortgage. And I want to show you what happens if someone puts $20,000 down on an amortization schedule. Okay, so just $20,000 down. If you look here, again, look at the original loan amount, $368,000. If we put $20,000 down, that would take us to about right here. Okay, and let me explain what that does. If you guys put $20,000 down, after you close on the home, you save 5 years of mortgage payments and almost $120,000 over the remaining 25-year period. Because, Jack, you see these little massive tiers of interest right here, like the first year, $26,000 in interest. You see all that? If you pay it ahead of time and you put that $20,000 down, get your ending balance down here, you avoid all of that awful, horrible, ridiculous interest. And that, sir, is how I would like to end.
Travis, that was fantastic stuff. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. Once again, folks, that is Travis from Real Estate Mindset. I'm going to put a link down below in the description to his YouTube channel. Definitely subscribe to that and tell him that nobody sent you, of course. And Travis, I will give you the last word, brother.
My last word would be this, Jack. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty. No one knows exactly what's going on. We have the tale of two, cities going on in the housing market with inventory, with homeowners, with different states, different markets. I would just say, Jack, for the consumers that are interested in purchasing a house, probably one of the most important things to do is understanding what your goals are. What do you want? And by understanding what your goals are, not only does that shape your approach, you will understand what a great deal looks like. We don't want to be stuck on the sideline renting. We don't want to just time the bottom of the market. We want to understand what we want. And for example, what I want is I want to purchase a home that has the price of about 2019 levels. Okay. So I want to find a home, 2019 levels, a home that I love, and I want the seller to pay all my closing costs. Literally, the second I find that, I will buy it. But right now, sir, I'm renting. And I want to say that it's perfectly okay if you're on the sideline and you're renting, but we don't want to get lazy. We want to stay increasing our purchasing power. And also, last thing, we want to be careful who we trust, and we want to put ourselves in a situation to where we can confidently trust ourselves.
So, Travis, thank you very much. Once again, folks, that's Travis from Real Estate Mindset. And everybody, until next time, live small and dream big.